Singapore Ghost Stories. 1. I once served guard duty at Nee Soon Camp. Around 2:30 a.m., my buddy and I were patrolling our usual route. It was our third and final round of the night. The two earlier rounds, one in the late afternoon and one in the early evening, went smoothly. That night was hot and humid. Typical Singapore weather. We passed the medical building, then the training field, sweating profusely. Next, we headed toward the shooting range. To get there, we had to go down a long slope, visible if you're driving on the SLE highway. At the top of the slope, I noticed this area usually had a cool breeze due to its proximity to the highway, and you'd hear crickets chirping. But that night, the air was stifling, no breeze, no crickets. I figured it was just too hot, even for the insects. We descended the slope, reached the shooting range gate, scanned the checkpoint, and turned back. Everything seemed normal, just uncomfortably humid, being late and on our final round. My buddy and I didn't talk much. At the bottom of the slope, I felt a tickle on the back of my neck, thinking it was a bug or cockroach. I brushed it off and muttered, "Shoo." Right then, I heard a giggle from the treetops to my left. Goosebumps shot up my spine, but I told myself it was just a bird. It didn't sound like a bird at all, but that was the only way I could calm myself. I thought I was the only one who noticed until my buddy said that sound was creepy. This guy was tough, loved commando stuff, and never believed in ghosts. But I could tell he was uneasy. I was still too spooked to respond. A few seconds later, he asked, "Can we run so?" We two silly new recruits completed our 2-hour patrol route in just 40 minutes. Still, we stopped at every checkpoint to avoid punishment, but we rushed through, sprinting from one point to the next. 2. At Mowbray Camp. 8 of us slept in a bunk with double-decker beds. For some reason, every night, we'd all wake up at exactly 1:48 a.m. At first, it was just odd, not a big deal. But then, a Burmese friend in our bunk decided to bring a powerful Burmese talisman to protect us all. That very night, things got worse. We all had nightmares. The disturbances intensified. I vividly remember being in a half-awake state, feeling like someone was breathing right in my face, trying to pull me fully awake. After that week, we asked our Burmese friend to take the talisman home because it seemed to make things worse. Even so, we kept waking up at 1:48 a.m. every night. But the disturbances weren't as terrifying as before. 3. My parents' HDB flat was an older design. Unlike modern BTOs, the living room window faced the corridor but was private because the room was elevated, so no one could peek in. To enter the flat, you had to climb 2 steps at the main door. Still, I could hear footsteps outside. As a kid, I'd get excited hearing my parents' footsteps when they came home. One day, while doing homework in the living room, I felt someone watching me. I turned and saw a plump face, like that of a frail old lady, staring through the window. I froze. A second later, The face vanished. I tried to find an explanation, but still can't make sense of it. I'm 1.8 meters tall, and even I can't look out that window. There were no footsteps either. The face just appeared and disappeared. It didn't harm me, but I was terrified for a long time after. 4. This happened during my national service at Khatib camp. One Sunday evening, I decided to return to camp early at 7:30 p.m. to eat dinner cup noodles since I was nearly broke and sleep before roll call at 10:30 p.m. When I reached my company's floor, I was the only one there. Not surprising, since we'd just finished field training and everyone wanted to stay out as long as possible before booking in. I prepared my cup noodles and ate at the common table in the bunk. While eating, I caught a glimpse from the corner of my eye of a woman walking past. She wore a white dress, slightly yellowish, and moved calmly, almost as if she were gliding or floating. I stopped eating, wondering if I'd seen things, but then I realized it couldn't be someone familiar. The 2 female colleagues in my company had short hair, while this woman had hair down to her waist. Just as I started to suspect I'd seen something supernatural, a voice spoke right behind me. "Do you know who I am? Have you figured out who I am?" I dropped my noodles and bolted to the smoking corner on the first floor. Luckily, I ran into the COS on duty. I told him everything, and he let me stay in the office with him until the rest of the company returned before I dared go back upstairs. That was the last time I booked in early. For the rest of my time in that unit, I always made sure at least one bunkmate returned to camp before I set foot inside. 5. This is my dad's story from a few years ago at a golf course in Singapore. Possibly Warren, I'm not sure. It was evening, and my dad and his friend thought they were the last players on the course. As they drove their buggy back to the clubhouse, they saw 2 Caucasian men playing golf, surprised, since they thought they were the last ones. My dad and his friend assumed the club had let these 2 in late. The men even waved and said something friendly. So my dad and his friend waved back and continued. At the clubhouse, the caddy said, "All done. We're closing up. You're the last ones." My dad immediately replied, "Oh, no, we saw 2 Caucasian guys on the course. They're probably still playing." The caddy's face went pale. Looking back, my dad found it odd. The men's attire looked outdated, think old school caps or berets, and their golf clubs appeared wooden, unlike modern ones. Now, every time my dad recalls it, he shudders, wondering what they saw that day. 6. When I was 12, I was a naive kid. During a school trip to Bukit Timah Hill, I found a huge walking stick at the foot of the hill by the roadside. When I picked it up, a swarm of red ants poured out, but I still thought it'd be cool to use for hiking. I even naively thought bringing it home was a great idea. Once home, I fell ill immediately. High fever, joint pain, stomach aches, and I couldn't stand straight. At 12, I was hobbling like a hunched old lady. straight out of The Hunchback of Notre Dame or a Nenek Kebayan. Hunched witch. By the second day, my mom was worried. Was it dengue, flu, or something else? They asked if I'd done anything unusual on the trip. When I mentioned the stick, my family freaked out. My late grandfather performed a bomo ritual involving burning herbs, prayers, and probably returning the stick to where it belonged. Almost immediately after, I recovered, as if nothing had happened. From then on, I learned my lesson: never mess with the forest. 7. This happened during Ramadan 2021, just a few weeks ago. I'm the lightest sleeper in the house, so I took on the role of waking up for sahur, the pre-dawn meal before fasting, reheating food, and calling everyone. Our house is an old 3-room flat, and I sleep on a bunk bed. I'm petite, so I use the lower bunk as a workspace. To see my bed, you'd need to be at least 1.5 meters tall. That night, around 3 a.m., I jolted awake to a whisper in my left ear. "You're still not up." I snapped awake, thinking it was a family member. But the room was dark, and the person sleeping beside me was fast asleep. I realized no one in the house was tall enough to do that. Since it was almost sahur time, I went to the kitchen to reheat food while working. I felt like someone was staring at me, but I ignored it. A few minutes before turning off the stove, another voice spoke from ahead. "Oh, it's done." "All right." I froze. The feeling of being watched vanished after that. I brushed it aside, called everyone to eat, and carried on as usual. After all, there was nothing I could do. 8. This happened at Changi Air Base before the new terminal was built. The area around the camp was all trees and dense vegetation, with a single long road connecting the main road to the camp. I was on night guard duty at a sentry post. One of my tasks was to dispose of trash at a nearby dump just outside the gate. I grabbed the keys and took the trash out. The dump was surrounded by a solid fence, even in daylight. You couldn't see anything beyond the fence and tall grass. As I unlocked the gate, I jumped at the sound of dogs barking nearby. Realizing they were stray dogs outside the fence, I calmed down, dumped the trash, and started locking up. Suddenly, I heard children laughing clearly, right beside me, outside the fence. It sounded like kids playing tag, giggling and panting, as clear as if I were wearing headphones playing top 10 children's laughs. I froze. There was nothing out there, let alone kids at 3:30 a.m. I quickly locked the gate, didn't dare return to the guard room, and ran straight to the nearest sentry post, spilling everything to the guard on duty. 9. This happened when I went to Batam for work at a shipyard. Due to overtime, my manager and I missed the ferry back to Singapore, so we booked a room at a 4 or 5-star hotel in Batam for the night. The room was apartment style, meant for 2, but with 2 bedrooms, a living room, and a small kitchen. It was on a high floor with a nice view of a tennis court and distant forest. We checked in and went to sleep. While sleeping on my side, I felt the bed sink behind me, like something was standing on it. I froze in fear. not daring to make a sound, telling myself I was just tired and imagining things. But then, the sinking feeling near my back eased, only to shift to the other side of the bed, then elsewhere, as if someone was hopping around on it. I was terrified, but kept my eyes shut, afraid of seeing something horrific. I prayed non-stop, eyes squeezed shut, and eventually passed out from exhaustion. The next morning, I asked my manager if he slept well, and he said he did. I didn't mention anything. Just let it go. That was the scariest encounter I've ever had. 10. Once, I worked with a veteran police officer who shared a strange case. He was dispatched to handle a complaint about a man staring at someone. At the scene, he and his partner searched the area but found no man. They stopped at a spot to discuss next steps. Suddenly, the control room radioed. The complainant just called back, asking why you two are standing right in front of the man staring at him and doing nothing. He and his partner immediately jumped into the patrol car and sped off into the night. 11. I used to live in a house in Salitar and would sneak out to the garden to smoke. My mom and her partner knew I smoked, but I kept it discreet. One night, my mom's partner got up for water and saw a figure standing silently in the garden, lit up under the street light. He called my name a few times, but the figure didn't respond. Thinking I was wearing earphones, he went back to bed, though a bit scared. The next day, he asked if I was in the garden at 2 a.m. I said no, I wasn't even home then. I lived in that house most of my life, so nothing there fazed me. But friends who visited always said the place felt creepy at night. 12. This happened in Tekong, Cougar Company, October 2017, and almost everyone there knew something about it. A guy from Platoon 2 was said to be possessed. It was chaotic. Some were shouting, calling for help. Others ran to get the sergeant. I couldn't get into the bunk where the guy was, but his bunkmate said he looked off, speaking gibberish and gasping. The sergeants arrived, told everyone to return to their bunks. The guy kept saying he was 100% possessed, not seizing or anything else, just possessed. He was taken away, either to the medical center or back to the mainland with a sergeant. Looking back, I'm not scared anymore, but witnessing it firsthand was chilling. 13. During a summer camp on a Singapore island. The first night featured a famous night walk. We followed a prepared path where senior students dressed as ghosts to scare the freshmen. Along the way, we had to complete tasks, including counting the number of scare actors. Everything went smoothly, and our group finished the tasks. Back at the gathering point, the seniors asked each of us how many scare actors we counted. Most said 10, the correct number, but a few said 11. The seniors were surprised and asked where the 11th actor was. Apparently, the 11th was seen sitting in a tree, where a senior was hiding to scare us. People joked that maybe Pontianak, a female ghost in legend, joined the camp for some fun. Oddly, the senior hiding in that tree fell seriously ill the next day and had to go home. 14 years ago, as a teenager, I went with friends to explore Bidadari. For those unaware, Bidadari used to have two cemeteries, one Muslim, one Christian, now a PTO site. About 10-12 of us went at dusk. Some friends said they smelled a fragrance at the Muslim cemetery, but I didn't. At the Christian cemetery, I saw a boy, about 9-10 years old, wearing glasses, sitting on a flat tombstone close to the ground. Over 30 lit candles surrounded him, and he stared at us. I felt a chill. When we left, I asked the group, but no one else saw the boy. 15. This is my friend's story. My friend lived on the ground floor of an HDB block. One night, coming home late around 2-3 a.m., he crashed on his bed, not too tired. He scrolled through his phone. Suddenly, he heard two kids, likely siblings, playing tag near his bedroom window. He ignored it. Though it was late, they chased each other, running around the block, and he could hear their footsteps clearly since his bed was right under the window. Then, they stopped near his window. The older sister, Kakak, said to the younger brother, Adik, this Abang isn't asleep yet. His hair stood on end, and he was paralyzed with fear. Note, Kaka, Ipula's older sister. Adik, Ipula, younger sibling. Abang equals older brother. 16. While sleeping on the 4th floor of a bunk near the staircase in Tekong, I heard about a strange incident. Over 10 people still awake heard footsteps approaching the bunk. Then the door opened about 3/4 of the way and closed on its own. No one saw a hand touch it. The hallway lights were positioned so that even if someone hid out of sight, their shadow would appear since the light was behind or to the left, but there was no shadow. In my first year of secondary school, over 20 years ago, I'd go to school early, sometimes before the gates opened, to read or finish forgotten homework. Once, I heard music playing, like from an old tape recorder, quite loud, coming from the classroom. There was an HDB estate nearby, but no music could come from there before 7 a.m. I shrugged and kept reading or working. I vaguely recall telling someone about the loud, nice music, but didn't think much of it. 17. 3 years ago, during BMT in Tekong, I had a weird experience. After returning from bookout, I found long hairs and wet patches on my bed. My slippers and shoes were misplaced. At first, I didn't think much of it, assuming someone was pranking. But before the next bookout, I had a terrifying nightmare. Then, I fell ill right after returning, running a high fever for a week. Back at camp, my bunkmate shared creepy rumors about our block. Someone mentioned a recruit finding a strange altar under a bunk bed, which was quickly removed. Luckily, I soon left Tekong for Gedong for other reasons. For the rest of my NS, I had no more paranormal encounters. 18. This happened during NS, in BMT, at a field camp behind Rocky Hill Camp. After setting up camp, we prepared to sleep. I was in a section, sleeping with my buddy. About 2-3 meters from the next section, around 10 p.m., as I was dozing off. Two guys nearby were whispering. Their voices were so soft I couldn't make out the words. So I fell asleep. At midnight, I woke up to pee and got my buddy to come along per the buddy system. We returned and slept. I still heard whispering from those two guys, but wasn't surprised since my section had stayed up talking the previous night. I slept again. At 4 a.m., I woke to pee again, probably a small bladder, and got my buddy back at our spot. I still heard muttering from those two guys. I figured they stayed up all night, maybe afraid of sergeants sneaking to check rifles. The next morning, I asked, and those two said they'd slept since 10 p.m. Their whole section confirmed no one was talking. I was skeptical, but got cut off by a sergeant for morning drills. I forgot about it until we returned to camp. Later, I asked my buddy, who woke up with me twice that night, if he heard the muttering. He said, "They're telling the truth. No one was talking." I got goosebumps thinking back. 19. I worked in a bank vault in the CBD. The vault was in a deep basement. Eerily quiet after transactions were balanced. One night, after locking the vault, the manager went upstairs, and I stayed to shut down the PC terminals. Right then, I heard a woman's voice clearly call my name. The room was small, with nowhere for anyone to hide except the terminals. I checked around, then heard the voice again, closer, right by my left ear, sounding impatient, urging me to respond. I rushed to the elevator and ran to the manager. When I told him, he laughed. "Now you know why no one wants to stay late handling cash." We were the last two to leave the building that night. 20. I was using the restroom after lunch in a quiet CBD toilet, back when I worked in finance. Suddenly, I heard a psst, then a strong fragrance. I shrugged and carried on. 5 minutes later, it happened again. Cold sweat broke out. My sphincter clenched, and I hurriedly cleaned up and went to wash my hands. While washing, I heard another psst. I nearly jumped. Then I heard a faint click. It was the automatic toilet air freshener spraying. 21. After a reveille parade, my bunkmate and I were the first back to the bunk. As we approached, the door slammed shut. At first, we thought someone was inside, but when we opened it, the room was pitch black and the windows were closed. The group panicked, unable to explain what happened. During BMT, I often woke up at 3 a.m. for no reason, looked around, and went back to sleep. One night, after an exhausting training day, the sergeant warned of a surprise inspection after lights out. At 3 a.m., I woke and saw a figure standing outside the hallway window. Looking into the bunk, my bed faced the window, near the toilet, where the hallway was very dark. I thought it was the sergeant checking, but on closer look, the figure had very long hair. Too tired to be scared, I ignored it and slept. 22. About 10-15 years ago, I got off a bus near the old police academy at midnight after class. Walking along the road, past a side gate, the air suddenly felt still and cold. I sensed someone standing inches behind me, staring at my skull. Terror surged, and I sprinted to the nearest junction, near a residential area. I felt safer. I initially thought I was tired or imagining things, but over the years, many people, strangers, older relatives, random folks shared similar experiences in that area. One person said while walking the same route, he felt scared. Suddenly, a white truck driver stopped, urged him to get in, saying he saw something following him and felt compelled to help. 23. I worked at Taco Bell in East Coast. One night, while closing, my manager and I locked the back shutter, shaking it to ensure it was secure. We walked a few steps, then heard the shutter rattle. We glanced at each other, turned back, and checked. The shutter had a transparent strip, so we looked outside. Nothing. We shook it again and walked on. A few steps later, it rattled again. Without a word, we hurried away, not daring to look back. I couldn't find a logical explanation. It was a calm night, not windy enough to shake the shutter. It was a weekday, and the area was quiet. Plus, we heard footsteps in the restaurant after closing and felt chills in certain spots. 24. My church friends held a party at Scariest Park that ran late, with no buses running. They decided to walk to Scariest MRT to catch a taxi pre-grab Uber days. I'm unsure if this route still exists, as I haven't been to Scariest in a while. But there was a path to the MRT through the mangrove forest, which they took. It had a wooden boardwalk, and thinking no one would head toward the park at that hour, they spread across the path. At one point, they passed a long-haired woman heading toward the park. They were stunned, wondering how she squeezed through when the boardwalk was fully occupied with no gaps. Terrified, my friends hurried through the rest of the mangrove, singing hymns as loudly as they could. Have you heard any other strange stories about Scariest or that mangrove area? 25. After my grandfather passed away, on the 7th day, my family followed superstitions to welcome him back. They set out food, turned on lights, and went to bed. I often stay up late, so I was in the living room until about 12:30 a.m. Nothing seemed off, so I went to bed. At 1 a.m., I heard footsteps outside, in our house. Opening a door is audible, but there was no door sound. My brother was awake, and I asked if he heard it. He did. Around 2 a.m., I went to the bathroom and smelled a strong fragrance. We don't burn incense, and the smell didn't fade even after standing there. I went to sleep. The next morning, my family said when they cleared the food at 6 a.m., they still smelled the fragrance. It only vanished after the food was cleared. That was definitely eerie, especially the mysterious fragrance. Have you heard more details from your family or had similar experiences since? 26. The story of the haunted flat in the East, where you and your family lived, is chilling. Here's a brief summary, keeping the eye perspective as you told it. In the early 2010s, my parents and I moved to an old flat built in the late 1970s in the East while waiting for our BTO. The flat had constant strange occurrences. The toilet flushed on its own. Rusted aluminum windows were randomly tapped. Lights flickered, rooms turned freezing in the daytime, and most terrifyingly, aluminum windows were knocked on at night with a woman's voice. The building was an en-bloc style, nearly empty, and we were the only ones on our floor. My mom once saw a spirit in the kitchen at night, and my dad saw a black shadow glide through the living room. I never saw a spirit, but one night, alone at home, I felt an icy chill and heard knocking on my bedroom door. The door opened on its own, though I was sure I'd locked it before sleeping. I was too scared to sleep until morning. The block had a few suicides, and I witnessed my uncle jump from the building. A haunting image I still carry. Thankfully, that block has been demolished. 27. Over 20 years ago, in secondary 2, I attended a 3-day, 2-night camp at Palawan Beach, Sentosa. We chose our tent spots, and mine was on a slope, about 5 mini-years from a large tree. I shared the tent with 3 other girls. That evening, while everyone was at dinner and games, I returned to the tent to grab something. Passing the tree, I saw a light shining from the trunk up to the canopy. From the corner of my eye, I saw what looked like a bodiless head's face. Terrified, I didn't dare look directly, glanced quickly, grabbed my stuff, and ran back to the group, about 50 meters away. The next night, I noticed no light shone from the trunk to the canopy. To this day, I wonder if it was an illusion. But whenever I see light hitting trees, I still shudder. 28. On my first night in Tekong, 10 minutes after lights out, my locker started shaking. At first, I thought my bunkmate was rummaging, so I ignored it. But the shaking continued, and I heard no one talking or moving in the bunk, where 14 strangers slept together for the first time. Worried, I called out, "Hey, are you moving the locker?" My bunkmate said he thought it was me. The bunk stirred, and we gathered in the middle to check. The locker kept shaking, though all 14 of us were far from it. Panicked, I ran to the sergeant's room, expecting to be laughed at. They told me to wait outside, closed the door, and 20 seconds later, came out with a Chinese ritual sword, telling me to stay downstairs. They went up for 5 minutes, returned, and told me to sleep. The locker never shook again. I tried to rationalize rat's a prank, but it never happened again. And the whole bunk witnessed it. I swear it's true, though Tekong is full of ghost stories. 29. I worked in an old, isolated university building, mainly programming. I brought my personal mechanical keyboard with backlighting that activates when typing, even if the computer is off, and mouse to the office. Once, a colleague, staying alone in the office on a weekend, heard my keyboard clacking like someone was typing and saw the backlight glow, though no one was there. Another time, I arrived at the office just after 7 a.m. when no one else was there. After cycling through rain, I opened the bathroom door and heard panting, like someone inside was startled by me. 30. During NS at Mowbray Camp, every night, my bunkmates and I woke up at exactly 3 a.m. At first, I thought it was noise, But then, realized we all woke simultaneously. It got creepier when a bunkmate brought a talisman to the bunk. That week, disturbances spiked. One night, 4 of us sat up at 3 a.m., staring at each other like, "What's going on?" My bunkmate swore he saw someone by the window. For me, one night, I was woken but didn't open my eyes, feeling like someone was breathing in my face. Oddly, I just turned away and slept. After that week, we told our bunkmate to remove the talisman.